Maybe we could be the swimming revs with the belugas or something like that. Well, I think I'm going to switch over to this mic because I have a hard time standing still. All right. We good? All right. Well, so good morning, Reading. So I do really work and get paid for doing all of that she's talking about. At the end of a 15 or 18-hour day, I am reminded that it is work as well. But actually, I was here today to kick off the season, or the week, I should say, or the month. I guess it is the month. With the Centers for Spiritual Living, we have a theme for each month. And the theme for this month is revealing wholeness. Today, the first Sunday of the month, we're talking about healing is revelation, or healing is a revelation. So, as I'm thinking about this revealing wholeness, I'm reminded, and I always like to remind you and tell you right straight up, what is my spiritual principle that I'm working with? Now, we might say that it is wholeness, but what does that mean? So for me, being reminded of my wholeness is being reminded that the center of my life, the center of your life, is poised in pure spirit. That everything that I say, everything that I do, every person that I meet, every relationship, every situation is grounded in pure spirit. Sometimes it doesn't look like that, but that is the truth. We're going to talk about healing, not only today, but all week long, all month long, talking about healing. And I want to be real careful and real clear about healing. As Reverend Mary mentioned, I work with the dying. And there's a lot of healing that goes on in the process of releasing our body. Healing is not necessarily curing. And we want to make sure that we are clear on that distinction. Now, there's a lot of different forms of healing. Healing takes place in many ways. Some wounds heal very quickly and visibly, like a physical healing of a scratch or a burn. But we have other wounds that can take more time to heal. A broken heart, a troubled life, or a dampened spirit requires greater depth of healing. This requires a healing of our mind, our body, and our soul, our spirit. What I am reminded of as I was preparing this talk is that every need for a healing is an invitation to turn within to God. An invitation to turn within for guidance and direction. Seeking that revelation of wholeness. The thing for us to do is to live in conscious and enthusiastic recognition of the life of the divine and to live in faith as faith. Now, Mary talked about how I spoke at the Lutheran Church for a couple of times a month for 2 years while they were looking for a new minister. The challenge, my spiritual practice that I had working with the Lutheran Church was every week they had a scripture reading. And so I would take that scripture reading and I would study it and what was the spiritual principle of that reading. And that would be the core of my talk for the week. So today, I want to share a verse with you. It comes from Matthew chapter 6, verse 22. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. And I would add, light of the divine. The eye is the lamp of the body. As we want the truth to be revealed to us, we must look with eyes that are clear. I'm reminded of something that I read once by Esther Hicks. You probably, some of you might be familiar with the teachings of Abraham. Esther Hicks, I once read, said that before she even gets out of bed in the morning, she says to herself, "Today I see only good. Today I see only good." Preparing herself, setting that intention, that in every relationship that she has, every situation that arises throughout the day, she is going to see the good. Charles Raymond Barker, one of the teachers that we have in this movement, says that when he is faced with a challenging situation, he says to himself, "Barker, you need a bigger idea. You need an awareness and an awakening that there is more to be had here, that there is something greater going on. This is the revelation that we seek to have. This is our healing revelation. What is the greater truth that is seeking to be known in every situation, in every thought, in every relationship?" Now, as we move into this idea of a healing revelation, I have 3 points that I want to cover today. The first point is this idea that there is something going on that is bigger than us, seeking the bigger idea, seeking the spiritual principle that is at work. And I like to keep it simple. What is the joy? What is the peace? What is the beauty? What is the love that is seeking to be revealed to me, of being expressed to me? The second point is asking ourselves, what is true about the situation? And the third point that I want to talk about is living in faith and as faith. Ernest Holmes tells us that there is nothing to be healed, only the truth to be revealed. And so we want to ask ourselves the truth. For me, that is having a solid understanding of the indwelling spirit that lives within me. Having an understanding, having a knowing that pure spirit lives in and through and as me, and that it is the center of my life. I want to learn about the whole mind, body, spirit connection. Now, some of you, again, in this teaching, we are quite familiar with Louise Hay. She wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Life. Or perhaps the teachings of Carolyn Meese, who wrote The Anatomy of Spirit. She talks about the chakra, or the energy centers in our body. And Carolyn Meese specifically speaks to how this energy, and Louise Hay also, how energy has to move through us. Sometimes, based on the religion that we grew up in, where we grew up in the world, we have societal norms, we have societal rules that we are to follow. And sometimes these rules tell us that your behavior is not acceptable. As Mary mentioned, I work with grieving families. One of the things that I find so common when I'm talking to these parents as they've lost a child, perhaps in a tragic accident, is they go back to work and the people that they work with don't know how to respond to them. And most often what happens is they say, "It's been a week. Get over it. Suck it up. Get back to work." See, our societal norm, I believe, is that we are not comfortable with grief. We are not comfortable with our own grief. We are not comfortable with the grief of others. But you know what we are comfortable with? As a society, we're comfortable with anger. Anger. So if somebody comes back into the office after a week of losing their loved one and they're angry, everybody's like, yeah. But if they come in and they say that they're sad, that they're missing their loved one, they're told, suck it up, get on with it. This is what happens with our body. We take those ideas, we take those beliefs, we take these ideas and we suppress them. Carolyn Meese talks about how there needs to be a flow of energy. The Chinese medicine, we have meridians, and energy needs to flow around us. When we begin to allow ourselves to be choked up by these societal norms, that energy gets blocked. And eventually, that is going to show up somewhere. It is going to show up as a physical pain and physical suffering. Now, we need to be really careful about this. I believe exactly everything that I've just said. And I also believe that within our metaphysical teaching that we have here, that we need to be really, really careful. Because I'm going to talk in a moment about spiritual excavation. We need to be careful because sometimes we can fall into the trap of saying, if I've become sick, I'm doing something wrong, or I am not worthy. We need to go back to the fundamental truth that we are always whole, perfect, and complete everywhere we are right now. Now, there might be some things we'd like to work on. About 60 pounds I'd like to shed and release. Maybe more. I'm willing to let them go, right? But you know what? In this teaching, sometimes we can get really hung up on, I'm not good enough. I'm not praying right. I'm not meditating right. I'm not studying enough, whatever it is, right? So I offer you to be gentle with yourself. Please be gentle with yourself. As you're reading something about Louise Hay, or you're reading Carolyn Meese, or any of the others. Spiritual excavation can be a frightening concept. What is spiritual excavation? This is that point where Ernest Holmes tells us that only the truth needs to be revealed. Louise Hay says there's no need to actually resolve any of our issues that we have. It only needs to be genuinely known, to be seen, to be heard. Now, one of the practices that I like to use, it comes from Byron Katie. Perhaps you've heard about it. It's called Is It True? With Byron Katie, when an emotion comes up, I am angry, I'm sad, I feel hurt, whatever it is, when it comes up, you say, is it true? Am I really angry? And perhaps you might say, no, I'm not angry, I'm afraid. Then you say, is that really true? And you ask the question again, and you get an answer. And then you take that answer, and a third time you ask, is it really true? Allowing those emotions that you have stuffed down, allowing those thoughts and feelings and beliefs and ideas that society says that we cannot have, that are not acceptable, to be seen and just recognized and to be held gently in our hearts. We want to go to our spiritual toolbox. When we're doing this kind of work, we want to go into prayer, taking what comes forth in seeking the truth and asking the truth. We want to go into prayer, taking it into meditation, contemplation. These are the practices that we teach at the Centers for Spiritual Living. Using those tools that you have to have your own revelation of the truth, of the divine truth of who you are. Sometimes, though, it's really hard. You know, it's really hard to remember the truth of who you are. All of us experience that, I believe. That's why we have practitioners. I don't know how many you have here, but it seemed like every other person I talked to earlier this morning was a practitioner. At one point I heard, well, there's only 2 here this morning, but you know what? The truth is we're all practitioners. Some of us have more training. Some of us have the title of being a licensed practitioner. But when you are in that place where you cannot remember who you are, go to one of your practitioners. Go to one of your ministers and tell them, I need to be reminded of who I am. I need to be reminded that I am whole, perfect, and complete. I need to be reminded that the center of my life is divine spirit. That spirit dwells in me and through me and as me. Ernest Holmes tells us that every person must go into the garden of their own soul and lifting up their consciousness, divine nature. When we do this, we will be resurrected into a new life and new light. When we go into the gardens of our own soul, we have a revelation of that which is bigger than ourselves. We can have that revelation of peace, that revelation of joy, that revelation of love. I want to read to you just a brief excerpt of a book. It was called, it's called Until I Say Goodbye, My Year of Living with Joy. This was written by Susan Spencer Wendell, very successful author. She was 42 years old at the time. She had been feeling ill for several weeks, a couple of months, just not quite right. She knew something was going on with her body. So she had gone in, she'd had some tests. She got a phone call. It said, you need to come down to the doctor's office, and you better have your husband bring you. Well, I think if you've ever had that phone call, you know right away. Okay. So she goes down to the doctor's office. The doctor says, I don't know how to break this to you, so I'm just going to tell it to you. You have ALS, and it is quite advanced. And we would expect you not to have much more than a year to live. She was shocked. She was stunned. She knew something was wrong, but she had no idea that it was going to be that catastrophic of a diagnosis. So she got up. She and her husband walked out without saying anything. They drove for a ways, and finally she told her husband, pull over, I need to get out of the car. So he pulls over into the nearest parking space, which happens to be a Burger King. She says, go away. So he gets out of the car and he walks away. This is what she writes about the moment later. And then it came to me too, alone, seated on one of those cement parking barriers outside of a Burger King. I wasn't having any fuzzy moments. My life was in focus. My mind was sharp as a tack. I sat there. 44 years of perfect health. I had rarely even had a head cold or tooth cavity. I had had 3 easy pregnancies, each producing a healthy, rosy, pudgy baby. I had known abiding love, traveled the world, married a great partner, and I worked at a job that I adored. I am alive. I have a year, maybe more, but I know that I have one more year of at least good physical health. I determined right there in the Burger King parking lot to spend it wisely, to take the trips that I longed to take and experience each pleasure that I longed for as well, to organize what I was leaving behind, to plant a garden of memories for my family to bloom into their future. Lou Gehrig was an athlete. ALS took his talent immediately. I am an author. ALS would curl my fingers and weaken my body, but it could not take my talent. I still have time to express myself, to build a place of my own with comfy chairs where I can think and write, where I can wander through my own garden of memories and write them down. A book not about illness and despair, but rather a record of my final wonderful year. I would write a gift to my children so that they would understand and that they would learn the way to live. Learning to live with joy, with love, with peace, and without fear. Standing up, I tucked my head once again into the starting block, steeling myself for a race. As my husband walked towards me, I thought, "Phew, glad that's over." And as he handed me a cup of coffee and snacked on a Whopper for himself, I said, "And I still feel lucky." Susan Spencer Wendell had her revelation in the parking lot of a Burger King. Sometimes we make this so much harder than it needs to be, because we think, okay, I need to go and assume the lotus position in order to have a revelation. Having a revelation of that bigger idea, she saw what was bigger here. She needed to create something that would allow her children to live and move into the future and live their lives without fear. She wrote the book as a gift to her children. It was a gift to all of us about how to live fully in the presence of the divine and as the divine, to live in peace and as peace, to live with joy, to live with love. And she did it sitting on a concrete barrier in a Burger King parking lot. We don't have to make it so hard. We only need to be willing to tell ourselves, I need an awareness. Opening up our hearts and our minds to new ideas. Opening up our hearts and minds, a new way of seeing. To start our day by saying, I see only good. I see the divine at work in every situation, in every person. This is the way that we can have a divine revelation. And then we live in faith. Ernest Holmes says that when prayer removes distrust and doubt, and our thoughts enter the field of mental certainty of the divine, it is faith. We live in that place of knowing that our life is posed in pure spirit. When I live in that place of understanding, having an acceptance of my birthright, your birthright, of divine peace and divine love, this creates an understanding of faith, and we can live in faith and as faith. Revealing wholeness, revealing the truth of who we are, being gentle with ourselves, allowing Spirit to move through us and as us. This is the divine revelation. This is the healing that can take place in our life. Let us take this into prayer. So recognizing right here and right now that there is one life, ever expressing itself, ever expanding, full of all potentiality. I know that that one life is the life of God. It is the divine one, expressing and moving and living through me and as me. Living and moving through me and as me as love, as joy, as peace, as beauty. I know that this is the divine truth for myself and for each person sitting in this sanctuary. It is the truth of every sentient being on the planet, including those beautiful little kittens that were playing in your meditation garden. It is the truth of everyone across the planet. And so I know that as I am renewed in mind, body, and spirit by the healing power of God within, so it is true for you. I know that this truth for myself as well as for all sentient beings on the planet. I know that if I am aligned with my inner spirit, as I am aligned with God, I can know that any healing, in whatever form it takes, is assured. I trust, I live in faith of the process of revelation that is at work within me. I give thanks on this day for this truth. I give thanks on this day for this place, which is called the Center for Spiritual Living in Reading, that I can come and be supported and lifted up in the truth of wholeness. I give thanks for this teaching of love. I give thanks on this day for the Divine One, the Divine Spirit, which uplifts, guides, and directs all that I say, all that I do, all that I am, that Spirit can live through me and as me. And I dare declare this truth for everyone in this room. And so it is from this place of gratitude, this place of love, this place of beauty and joy, that I release this word into the very power of Spirit. And I let it go. And together we say, and so it is.